Welcome, everyone. I appreciate your time in being here tonight. We welcome you to the first in a series of Holmes Murphy webinars for the Ancient Egyptian Arabic Order Nobles Mystic Shrine. This is the first in a series. There'll be 3 more after this. We'll be talking tonight about how the insurance program for temples and courts protects your members and what you can expect from your Holmes Murphy team. My name is Bobbi Larsen, and I serve Holmes Murphy as the Education Consultant. I'll be your moderator tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few logistics regarding tonight's program. I've muted everyone by default. The only people you'll be able to hear during the webinar are presenters and me. Any questions or comments should be proposed in the chat panel on your screen. You can find the chat button in the middle of the ribbon at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question throughout the program, please type it into the chat. I'll be monitoring it during Rich's presentation. Please note this webinar is being recorded to allow those who are not able to join us tonight to gain access to the material. Now I'm joined by my Holmes Murphy colleague, Rich Jungman, our fraternal practice leader. Rich is a graduate of Northwest Missouri State University and an initiate of Phi Sigma Kappa fraternity. He's been employed with Holmes Murphy since 2002 and has 30 years of industry experience. His responsibilities include leading our fraternal practice team, new business development, risk management consultation and presentation services, agency financial operations, and client service responsibilities. In that, he does sales, client advocacy, manages carrier relationships, and has the oversight of education and prevention. His understanding of the operations and procedures of an insurance carrier provide a great resource to their clients in time of need, and I'm delighted to ask Rich to take over.
All right, thank you, Bobbi. Hang on. I'm learning to be the Zoom operator, so bear with me here. First I want to thank Dr. Gray for initiating these educational seminars that we're going to accomplish over the next few weeks to kind of help the temple officers and leadership, understand the insurance program, but more importantly, kind of understand or probably just re-educate each one or refresh people on, just steps that we can take to mitigate our exposure to having a claim, or in the event that we do have a claim, responding to those appropriately. So today, what we're really going to want to, what I wanted to accomplish was, I was in New Orleans at the, that probably would have been either the second to the last one, because we didn't have a convention this year, when we first rolled out the insurance program and gave an overview of what was provided within the temple and court program. And certainly probably has been some change in leadership since then. So just, I think it's a good start in our first series of webinars is just to really kind of go back over the insurance program and what it does, what it covers, and what it doesn't cover, and how you as a volunteer and an officer for your temple or court are covered. So I'm going to start to share my screen here. We put together a PowerPoint for this to help me facilitate it. I am going to just start out with a couple disclaimers. Not feeling my best today. Just whatever I ate over lunch is not agreed with me, but I'm trying to get that all figured out. And then I also have a cat that seems to have radar for whenever Zoom things or Teams meetings or anything online is going on, that comes around and meows and wants to be placed outside. So hopefully we won't see her. But Bobbi, I'm sure, not seeing, oh, there I go. Now I advance my slides. Okay. So, and again, kind of a novice on running the screen here, but we'll just get started. Just Temple Insurance Program 101 is what we'll call it today. First off, I wanted to just introduce kind of the Holmes Murphy team that's there to serve the temples, from, claims to policy service to educational services. Terry Simmerman is the client service consultant. So if you ever had to get a certificate or something from the policy, that's likely someone that you talk to. Obviously myself as a client advocate, I work on the renewals and the proposals with Terry. Rob Mraz, hopefully a gentleman you have not had an opportunity to meet, but he's our claims advocate. So whenever we have an issue with claims. That's who we want to get engaged and involved in those issues. Make sure that the claims reported timely to the right carrier, and then Lori and Bobby are two educational folks, and then Quinette is the financial analyst that would work with the IHQ in regards to making sure all the invoices get paid and if there's any additional premiums. So a very full and team there to help you on any different things that may arise that you might have questions on relative to the insurance program. So the insurance program that we have for the ancients, for all the temples and courts, is basically comprised of 3 main coverages and a 4th one that we'll address a little bit later in the program. But general liability, directors and officers and employment practices liability, and commercial crime coverage. And in 2017, we started the group program, and it was something that we had been working on with the temples and the leadership of the organization since probably dating back to 2013. And just like anything where it doesn't previously exist, it takes time, kind of to get this thing off the ground and rolling. But really, what was the objective of, going and getting the group program? Well, first off, probably for the first time in the history of the organization, every temple has insurance. Every temple and court has insurance coverage. That's, a 24/7, 365 coverage. It's not just specific for events. Anything that we're doing as an organization is now covered, obviously subject to terms and conditions. What we also found out, and what we see in a lot of the work that we do, especially when it's small risk, is one small, when you're just a small policy, you probably don't get the level of coverage that you'd like to have. You get what that they'll offer. If something happens, it probably results in you getting canceled. So, there's just a lack of certainty of availability of coverage, and with being part of a larger group, we've obviously increased that certainty of the availability of coverage. We also, what we've done for the officers that had to, used to have to make the decision of, shopping it, making sure that the right terms and conditions were there, that there weren't any unexpected exclusions, is that, we've helped reduce the fiduciary errors that are potential on the behalf of an officer, because, we've got great coverage that is in place. It's addressing the exposures that you guys face on a day-to-day basis. So it allows you to kind of move on and to do other things that are more impactful for the communities and the philanthropies that you serve. And hopefully, like today's event, we'll be able to enhance services that we can provide as the broker to you guys, in helping you guys, not only transfer the risk through the purchase of insurance, but also ways to mitigate and eliminate where possible, mitigate where not possible risk, and obviously reduce losses in the event that they do occur through proactive response. But just to kind of get off, obviously one of the things with the group program is always going to be, obviously we've got an aggregated amount of premiums, but we also all of a sudden have, one policies that's, exposed to 200 plus different operations throughout the country, potentially, having a claim. And, I always say we're off to a really good start, but everybody, I'd like you to knock on wood. Right now the loss ratio is 7%, and we've only had one reported general liability claim, which has been a very, minor claim that should not, create any issues. But when I also say that, it's great to get off on that good, on that good start, but we just have to be mindful of. There's my dog. I was blaming my cat. Now my dog is getting into the act here. we just got to make sure that we're, managing that risk, reducing it where we can reduce it to kind of keep this going, because obviously this is the key to sustainability of the program, as well as kind of consistent and level pricing, and hopefully where we can continue to reduce that cost over time. So great job on the start of this program. Keep up the great work, and we're going to do everything we can do to help you along through that process. So the insurance program, currently that is with Landmark American Insurance Company. They have an AM Best of A+, so very strong, financially secure insurance company. Today, the limits that they provide to each temple is $1 million per occurrence. And basically the per occurrence would be in one single event. That's the most that they would pay. So, if we had a fire in a facility where we had several people injured, the most the policy would pay for that single occurrence, which is the fire, is $1 million. The $2 million general aggregate is the most that they will pay in the policy term on the behalf of any one temple or court. In addition to that, we have $1 million of personal and advertising injury. That's a little different. We have bodily injury and property damage that are covered, and also personal injury. And personal injury is defamation, libel. It can be false imprisonment, and advertising, other advertising injuries such as trademark violations, various things like that. That's what falls into that personal and advertising injuries. And then $2 million for the products and completed operations. If we rent a facility, we have $1 million in damage for that rented facility. The rented facilities that it's going to extend that coverage under are going to be facilities that we lease for a period of 7 days or more. But that coverage is going to be limited to the perils of fire and smoke damage. So any facility we lease greater than 7 days, the policy only will respond for damage to that leased facility if it is out of the perils of fire and smoke. And then we have $5,000 in medical payments coverage, which takes care of medical bills that somebody may have incurred as a result of injuring themselves at one of our premises or at one of our events. And that is considered what is considered a no-fault coverage. If the person's uninsured and it isn't excluded, we have to pay, the insurance carrier has to pay that benefit to that party. They can't ask for a release. They can't say that it's their fault. So it is what's considered a goodwill payment. The policy does carry a $2,500 deductible, but that deductible only applies to indemnity only. So if it's a case where we just merely investigate, or we have to respond to a lawsuit or some issue where we don't actually ever pay somebody damages, which is what indemnity is, then the deductible wouldn't apply. Once we paid a settlement or a jury verdict, that's where that deductible would apply. Some real highlights of it: the limits are provided on a per location basis. That's always one of the concerns you have with group policies, is that you could have 1 or 2 claims that exhausted all the coverage, leaving the other people that participated in the group program without any insurance coverage for the remainder of the year. That's addressed by those limits that you saw on the screen are on a per court temple basis. So we don't have the possibility of one temple or court exhausting the coverage of another. It also includes host liquor liability, which I think in most cases is our exposure. That's where we're just, basically in a social host situation. We're not selling the alcohol, or, in the business of selling alcohol, but maybe we've had a function that involves alcohol, or as alcohol is allowed, that's where that's going to be picked up. It's also very specific, and then we have coverage for hazing, assault and battery, sexual assault and molestation, except for the perpetrators of those excluded acts. and anyone else that might be directing or supervising or observing those excluded acts. Supplementary payments are paid in addition to the limit of liabilities. And we saw that $1 million on the prior screen. That's exclusively for paying damages to a third party that we may, our negligence, your negligence may have caused someone to sustain. So the supplementary payments are the cost of those attorneys that a lot of times have to be retained to answer lawsuits and provide a defense. Those expenses don't erode that $1 million, and they're paid on an unlimited basis up into the point where there's either a settlement or a jury verdict rendered. So, that is a very valuable part of this coverage, because certainly, in today's day and age, lawyers are very expensive, and legal fees in the defense of tort claims can add up very quickly. The policy also includes coverage for terrorism. From a general liability perspective, a lot of times people call and they want directors and officers coverage, and they're, what they're really concerned about are claims that fall within a general liability policy. The most common type of claim we're going to have is some type of bodily injury claim, or potentially property damage. But for the most part, with general liability, we see, that being bodily injury. And what are kind of the leading causes of general liability claims for fraternal organizations? Slips, trips, and falls for you guys at your events are going to be the biggest driver of claims, and the things that we should be, concerned about, whether it's our own premise or it's a rented premise. How are we addressing, those exposures to make sure that, our guests, our members and their guests are free of those hazards, either at our own temples or at venues that we lease. Certainly, hazing in any organization where there's an intake and ritual process always has the potential. And if you read the definition of hazing, it's a very, very broad definition in most state statutes where it's defined. And a lot of times it's in the eye of the beholder of whether they're, they feel like that they were hazed or not. So something, that we definitely want to address with inside this program, but also, look at ways that we reduce that exposure. And then sexual and physical assault is also a big issue. And I really put the fourth one, alcohol related incidents, but, probably all three of those buckets can be certainly driven, by issues around alcohol. And so, as we indicated previously, the insurance program is going to pay up to $1 million per occurrence for the following organizations. Obviously, the national organizations, its officers, directors, employees, and volunteers, but also the various other levels of the organization, deserts, temples, and courts that are recognized in each one of those entities, officers, directors, and employees, and members and volunteers who are in good financial standing with the organization. But the key to that too is that it's only while we're performing duties related to the conduct of those respective deserts, courts, or temples, businesses, business activities. So just merely attending an event doesn't qualify as an insured. I mean, you need to be somewhere, in that officer's role to be extended as an individual coverage under this policy, or have real specific volunteer requirements. I mean, I know that we have, within organizations have not only the officers, but committees that are doing things. When we do have functions, there's going to be people that volunteer to do certain functions while we're having those events and those activities. And those people would be provided coverage as long as the incident or alleged negligence occurred during the conduct or fulfillment of those duties. Who's not covered? Any individual who is performing tasks outside of their duties, or just there for their own personal enjoyment. But or if you have an affiliate, or you're a temple that isn't currently recognized. Any member whose illegal or intentional actions result in injury or to an individual or property damage are not provided coverage. Obviously, no insurance policy in the world covers intentional acts. And then really any guest or non-member, with the exception of someone that might be serving in that volunteer role on behalf of one of the temples or courts. For the domestic liability, some real important notes. New in 2020 is the communicable disease exclusion. I'm sure, if you have any dealings with commercial insurance, it's a very big leading issue where we're seeing most carriers take the position at each renewal that they're excluding coverage for communicable diseases. And it's really it's targeting COVID-19. Our communicable disease exclusion, or our landmark Americans, has a limitation that at least has to be a pandemic or epidemic that's been formally declared by one of the governing health associations or the federal government for it to apply, which obviously we are currently in with COVID-19. From that standpoint, I think it's going to be very difficult for any plaintiffs to really prove where someone contracted COVID. The contact tracing is going to be very difficult. While we have pushed back on insurance companies to remove this exclusionary wording, we've not been successful. But we also are aware of that. I think it's a very difficult case to prove against someone relative to where they contacted or that you've done anything from a negligent standpoint that allowed them to contract, the disease. We are seeing in a lot of states there are passing basic liability shields for certain businesses that are at least raising the threshold for a claim around COVID-19 to survive being at least, you'd have to be at least responsible for willful and wanton negligence. So a much higher bar than what you would have otherwise with ordinary negligence. So our recommendation is if we are, doing any types of events, we're following, your CDC guidelines, relative to those that you're, watching what's going on in your local venue, relative to that state or your municipality in regards to the size of events. Certainly encourage as much as we can do, through these types of platforms such as Zoom or Teams or Google Meets, as much business that can be done that way. But, when we are together, just make sure that we're, doing the things that everybody's asking us to do: wear masks, wash our hands, and maintain, a responsible distance between one another. And, just don't have events if we're incapable of doing that. And I know the headquarters has a position in regards to whether there's, what you're allowed to do and not to do. I'm just giving you my recommendations around dealing with this exclusion within the policy. Yep.
We do have a question. Does that mean no third-party coverage?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep, this is on the general liability. And then just a reminder on the third-party rental. I think this is in one of the biggest cases, and probably for any temple, it was around a rental of the facility to a third party. So if you are an owner or lease a facility that you might lease to other third parties for birthday parties or wedding receptions or whatever, graduations, whatever it may be, let's make sure that we remember, in order for coverage to apply for that use of that property, we need to have an executed user agreement in place, which at the start of the program, we developed a template that each temple can look at and use as, again, a template tailored to your own individual venue to make sure that it meets those requirements, and that also that third party is insured and provides additional insured status to both the local temple as well as the national organization. And then I believe this is kind of old news, but obviously we have host liquor. We don't have liquor liability under the policy. So if we have any temples that have a Grenadier Club or have some form of, formal sale of alcohol, there's a need for coverage outside of this program for that. Any other questions around those 3 points? Okay. The next piece of the insurance program is directors and officers and employment practices. So again, domestic exposures only. RSUI Indemnity is the insurance carrier there, AM Best rating of A+. So again, very, very strong company. This is, the limit is $250,000 per claim in annual aggregate per desert, temple, or court, with a $5 million overall policy aggregate. So, we do have a situation where we have some overall policy aggregate, which is in this case. Again, the deductibles for each insuring agreement is below. Insuring agreement A is for any officer where there is no duty on behalf of the organization and its bylaws to indemnify you. Then that insuring agreement A responds to directors and officers claims with no deductible. The rest of the coverages provided under this contract have a deductible of $5,000, and that would also not only be indemnity but also supplementary payments, those expenses associated with the investigation or defense of a claim.
One question, Rich. Someone asked that they thought that the Grenadier clubs were dissolved.
Yes, and that's what I believe to be true as well.
Second question, is there only coverage for domestic, not international?
No, we do have an international policy for the general liability as well, but I don't think we have it addressed in this PowerPoint. But yes, we do have a policy for the international exposures as well.
Thank you.
Just some highlights of the directors and officers is $100,000 sublimit for crisis management, $100,000 sublimit for defensive wage and hour claims. So if we have any local employees that say we didn't give them breaks or didn't pay them overtime, it will defend the temple or court for those types of claims with the national organization. In the event that there are back wages or penalties associated with that are owed, it would not pay those. It only pays the defense. Also has coverage for non-monetary relief. And then a very important part of the coverage, in my opinion, is third-party discrimination coverage. That can come from, it could come from a vendor that we work with that says maybe, they were harassed when they were at, one of our places of business. It could be someone that alleged that they weren't allowed membership into the organization, for some reason. So obviously we do a lot of work in the fraternity world, and we're seeing some challenges around single sex, the single sex membership, and that being a discriminatory practice. So this is a very important coverage in today's litigious environment, and it is extended under that directors and officers. And the other point is that any claims that are brought outside the United States are excluded under this policy. So just a few examples of, kind of where the D&O and EPL liability exposures exist. You might have a vendor sues alleging breach of contract. I think this was a pretty big issue as we started to kind of go down the road of the lockdown during COVID-19, you know, folks trying to get out of their contracts and vendors trying to keep them in the contract, and you could get sued because you didn't fulfill your part of the your obligations, or alleged allegations alleging you didn't fulfill the requirements of the organization under that contract. Obviously, the third party sues alleging discrimination due to gender or sex, or you can just have a member sue that alleges that there was mismanagement of the funds of the organization and other waste that brought harm to the organization. So a very mirrored amount of type of claims. I always like to say that I think the directors and officer policy and EPL is one that dovetails with the general liability, you know, to provide the necessary coverage of, you know, the bodily injury type of claims, and then these other what we call management practices type of claims. In addition to those three lines of coverage, we also have business auto. And so basically that's providing us coverage for hired, which are rental vehicles, and non-owned autos, which are, you know, potentially autos that a member might be using an auto in the course and scope of some duties that they have on the part of the temple. And they'd be involved in an auto accident during that. So we have a principal agency relationship. We got to make sure that we have the temple covered for that. It certainly isn't a replacement for a member's own auto insurance. It's really there just to make sure that the organization is properly protected in the event that we have that. I know many times we've had a lot of rental vehicles and the need for this insurance coverage. So definitely there and available. We got, I think Sam raised his. Oh, there's somebody. I'm going to admit somebody there. So that's providing $1 million combined single limit. And for the physical damage, which is only to the hired autos, the rental vehicles, it's providing coverage, actual cash value not to exceed $80,000, both for comprehensive and collision. Those two lines of coverage are subject to a $500 per occurrence deductible. And the liability coverage is provided on a first dollar basis, which means, as we saw with the directors and officers and the general liability policy, there was a small modest deductible associated with each one of those. Under the liability of the hired non-owned auto liability coverage, there is no deductible, with the exception of the physical damage to a rental vehicle that we may be responsible for.
Okay, Rich, we have a series of questions. Is this a good time to interrupt?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Can the court's temples get copies of the policy? We've also had questions about copies of the PowerPoint. Will we be able to share that information?
Yes, we can definitely share the PowerPoint, and then I will defer to Gloria in regards to providing any copies of the actual insurance contracts. We do produce an insurance and claim manual that is basically a layperson's overview of all the insurance coverage under the program, which a lot of times people prefer over, you know, close to 500 pages of insurance policy. We try to boil that down into 10 pages.
And we'll make sure that we share that. This question, I have temples overseas. Where can I find the international portion of our policy coverage? If we can get contact information, we can provide that. Okay. Yes, and I'll put my email address in the chat, and you can email me, and we'll make sure that we follow up on that. John Chapman says the Office of Equity and Diversity was established this year. Thank you for sharing that. The PowerPoint will be shared, and I apologize. Apparently this license is supposed to be for 500 people, and people beyond 300 are being blocked. So I'm not quite sure what is happening with that. We'll be sure that we share the recording and all the materials with the folks that couldn't get in, and we'll get that changed by next time, but I apologize if there are folks trying to get in. Okay, another question. What is the threshold before a carrier drops the insured? I noticed we're at 7% now. I've had carriers drop my business for one claim after having been a client for years.
Yeah. Well, what I will tell you from the standpoint of the carriers that we work with, Landmark being one that we've had a working relationship since 1997, and another carrier since 1996. We have never had anyone non-renewed. I mean, we feel like that we're operating programs. We're going to have all clients are going to have highs and lows. So our carriers have been very good about working with us relative to, adjusting as necessary in regards to the premiums, terms and conditions to try to make it work. So our biggest challenge is that we're always constantly working to be better at managing our risk, reducing it where we can. Obviously eliminating it, which is nearly impossible, but if we're doing the right things, we will always be able to have an insurance program for the temples and courts.
Okay, one question here. What if you rent a bus to travel? Is it covered?
If you're renting a bus to travel, please contact us, because it's something that we would want to address specifically with the carrier, because there are size limitations on that. So if you're renting a bus with a driver, we would just want to make sure that that bus company has the appropriate insurance coverage, and they're not asking you, for anything unnecessary, like indemnifying them or you providing the insurance. So in that situation, if it's bigger than a 15-passenger van, I highly recommend you contact us to discuss.
Okay, I have a couple of responses from John Chapman. Direct them to Mrs. Lewis in Memphis, who will facilitate an answer for overseas coverage. So if you have questions about that, please reach out to Ms. Lewis. No, they do not receive copies of the policies, and again, direct their inquiries to Ms. Lewis. But I think we can share that insurance and claim manual that I think has been very helpful to other clients. And can we make the bus information available for all? Again, I believe if you can, we'll try to follow up with our concluding email with information about the bus stuff. They have groups that use chartered buses for events, etc. So, Rich, if we can come up with some sort of general response to that and include it when we follow up after this meeting, help me remember. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions, Bobby, before I move on?
Got another one. Are children participating in sanctioned youth activities covered?
Well, obviously it's an activity, so that's a very broad question. I'd probably ask that it be somewhat narrower, but if we're asking like the potential of molestation associated with a group activity or an injury to the child, that they fell and hurt themselves, yes, the temples and courts are covered for those exposures. The child itself being an insured under the policy, likely not. Did that appropriately answer their question?
I'm not seeing anything come back. Youth groups. And John says, yes, youth groups. So I believe it did answer the question.
Okay.
And John Chapman has an answer for me that we will share in our follow-up materials about the bus stuff. So look for that in the communication after this event. That will include the recording, the PowerPoint, and any other information that comes up.
All right. Well, moving on, and obviously if there's any questions, just keep them coming. Really appreciate that. So just like the commercial auto, business auto, Guide One Insurance Company, MBS rating A-, is the carrier for the commercial crime coverage. We have $100,000 limit on all lines of coverage. listed below, subject to a $1,000 deductible for those. Just some crime coverage claim examples, and you know, probably like with the slip, trips, and falls, you know, this is probably your biggest risk to an organization. We see a lot of thefts from not-for-profits, but you know, and a lot of people say, well, we don't have any money. How can anybody steal anything from us? Well, they can steal it over a long period of time. You know, a little bit over a long period of time adds up. You know, a treasurer can skim $1,000 a year for 20 years, and he's, you know, stolen quite a bit of money. You know, the court treasurer, you know, what we're seeing a lot of times, court treasurer, I'm not saying your court treasurer, but a treasurer of a not-for-profit, you know, is paying personal expenses using their Visa bill, personal Visa bills with court funds, and then becomes inactive in the organization, or there is a credit card maybe provided to them, and they improperly use that for personal expenses, or a box where cash from an outdoor carnival gets stolen. And those coverages that we just kind of addressed are things that are going to pick up and cover those types of exposures. But again, this is really an important area that I really encourage that you have some strong financial management best practice to reduce the exposure to the potential embezzlement claim. You know, too many times we've seen where we've had a loss, that the amount of insurance that we have available is insufficient to cover the entire claim, which obviously leaves the organization in a peril from a financial standpoint. But the number one thing that I would say that you can do that greatly reduces the chance that this will occur to your temple or court is that we make sure that we segregate those duties. So somebody that's responsible for paying the bills is not the one reconciling the accounts. So we have somebody that's the bill payer, and we have somebody that's the reconciler of the accounts, and those accounts should be reconciled on a monthly basis. You know, at least at this point in time, it would take collusion on the part of those two individuals to perpetrate the crime. It certainly doesn't eliminate the possibility that you know, someone might still steal from the organization, but it's at least going to eliminate some of these the ways that we see that you know, just show that there was absolutely no oversight, and people soon learn that is where they're writing checks to themselves. They're pulling cash out on a regular basis. Like we said earlier, paying their own personal Visa bill, you know, with funds from the organization. Dual signatures or some type of payment approval process. I know there's a lot of pushback on dual signatures and its role in the financial institutions these days. You know, I don't think that it would matter to a bank whether there was two signatures or not to process the check. I don't think they even care if people sign their own check anymore when they process payments, and process those. But at least when we have dual signatures or a payment approval process, again, you know, we are having some oversight in watching what's being asked to be paid. You know, term limits for officers. You know, a lot of the cases that where we see large embezzlement claims, it's because somebody sat in a treasurer's role, you know, for 10 years, 20 years, and you know, has never had another set of fresh eyes, I guess, on those books. But when we do term out our officers and the board's role, you know, have some turnover and change, and whoever has access, because everything we do anymore is online, you know, we got online access to our bank accounts and all of that stuff. Let's make sure that we're changing those passwords. And we've seen that where even after an officer was no longer serving, they still had access to the account and still have money because they still had those passwords that have never been, you know, changed. Limit the ability to withdraw cash is, you know, is a great way to try to manage this risk, and just verifying all expenditures with receipts. You know, the whole goal here is to make it have to be a fairly clever scheme in order for them to steal monies from us versus just being able to really kind of take it underneath underneath our nose. But avoid accepting cash. That obviously always creates issues. And then we would just recommend that the board reviews on a monthly or quarterly basis the bank statements. Ask the the financial people to to give a full accounting of what's occurred, and depending on the asset size of the and how much revenues that the any specific temple or court may have, you might want to consider an independent auditor, or at least establish an audit committee with volunteers that have some expertise in this area that can do this on an annual basis, just to make sure that the financial standing of the organization is in a good place.
A couple of questions and comments here, Rich. Does the crime coverage relieve us of the need for bonding? And related, are you saying that your company bonds the fiduciary officers?
Correct. It's a blanket crime bond for for employee dishonesty. Volunteer officers are considered employees, and so it's a blanket bond for all of those individuals that handle money.
And then a comment from John Chapman. The accounts receivable and payable offices, recorder/treasurer, as well as the leader, potentate commandresses, are to countersign all payments, discontinuing use of debit cards as payment mechanisms, also he's saying. And I think we're caught up. Thanks.
Okay. And then, so you saw the four, basically our 4 lines of coverage that we have here is the GL, the DNO employment practices, the commercial auto, and the crime policy. Some voluntary lines of coverage based upon whether it's needed would be a liquor liability policy if there's any selling or serving of alcohol, which I don't think is an exposure anymore amongst the organizations. We do have some insureds that will maybe do fundraisers by working a concession at a professional or college sporting event that may serve alcohol, or a concert, and that is a liquor exposure that needs to be addressed. We can likely get a single event addressed on a one-off basis under the RSUI policy for some additional premium around that's something that looks like that. Also, those venues that you might be doing it for might have an insurance program that provides the requisite coverage that they require to allow a not-for-profit to serve at their concessions and collect money, especially around alcohol service. Commercial property. If you do have a temple, we'd be happy to take a look at what you're doing for property insurance and provide an alternative if you'd like us to. Equipment breakdown kind of goes in with that commercial property. And then workers' compensation. So if we have any employees, you should get workers' compensation. I know that in some states, certain employers that maybe have less than 5 employees are exempt from providing workers' compensation. Even where it would be a voluntary purchase, I would strongly recommend it, because it becomes the exclusive remedy of those employees should there ever be an injury on the job. Otherwise, you can be brought, they can sue you just like anybody else under allegations of negligence, and inside of your general liability policy is exclusions for claims brought by employees. So while we might be exempt on one hand, if we're not still purchasing that insurance, we create a gap because we've got an issue with coverage should that employee be injured in the course and scope of their position with you. And then the last piece is cyber liability. As we manage websites, have data that we maintain, this becomes a bigger issue every year. It's kind of an emerging risk and something the insurance industry has stepped up and provided an insurance solution for. Any questions there, Bobby?
Unmute, gotta remember to unmute. Okay, is every member in good standing bonded, or just head officers?
Just the officers.
And another question, if we host an event, is BYOB permissible, and are we precluded from providing soft drinks?
No, soft drinks are perfectly fine. As far as the insurance contract goes, BYOB is not a problem because that still keeps us in the host frame, host liquor frame. You know, we're not in the business of serving, so that wouldn't invalidate coverage. But I would probably defer to John and Gloria in regards to any specific policies that they may, you know, the national organization may have around alcohol service. If BYOB is okay, then, you know, when we do our next webinar series, you know, we were really we'll hit on, you know, what our best practice recommendations are relative to hosting a BYOB event.
Thanks.
That's it. All right. And we're going to we'll have more in a webinar that's more driven by just these things, but I do, you know, one thing I do want to bring to your attention is take time to, you know, when we're asked to sign contracts and you're contracting for whether that's services or a venue, you know, we really need to look closely at these contracts and do this before you sign it, because once you sign it, you've lost all negotiating abilities around, you know, making sure that these contracts you're signing are fair. You know, first off, are the insurance requirements reasonable, and can they be fulfilled by, you know, what's provided through this temple and court insurance program? You know, things you need to look for is equitable indemnification clauses. We see a lot of these venues that basically are shifting all the responsibility off onto the leasee of a venue space, including many times the negligence of their own employees, which is not acceptable. And, you know, once somebody points that out, we'll usually see these venues modify that. Equitable waiver of subrogation clauses, you know, that's more along the lines where we're leasing facilities, you know, whether that's a long-term lease or a short-term lease. You know, basically what a waiver of subrogation clause does is we'd like to see that mutual in the event that there is insurance coverage for anything that might happen, especially to the, you know, maybe damage to the facility, that if it's covered under the insurance contract, the insurers have already agreed in advance not to come after the other party to the contract. Limitation of liability clauses. A lot of times we'll see, especially in these charter bus contracts, to where they try to limit their exposure by, you know, being 3 times the amount of the payment of the, you know, whatever it costs to lease the vehicle. So, you know, really trying to impose, you know, limitations that aren't practical. And in this day and age, I think what everybody's learned over the last few months is what force majeure. I think that's my only piece of French that I know now. But what that clause means and how important it is to have that in there when there's an impossibility within the contract to fulfill it, that there's something within that contract that gives you or the other party the opportunity to cancel the contract without any penalty.
Couple of questions and comments. John Chapman notes that contracts are reviewed by the legal department of the organization. A question, when you rent to third parties, where can I get a copy of the template to determine the language for the contract?
And that's in that insurance and claim manual, which we'll get out right after this. You know, what I'd like to say is, you know, to John there, thank you for doing that. I think that's an amazing service that you guys provide. And the only thing that I will reiterate about that, please make sure that you're utilizing that service if you need it before you sign contracts. Once you sign it, it's nearly impossible to make any changes to that contract. So, you know, plan well in advance, and, you know, give the referral process time, but, don't sign anything until you get that contract where you want it. It's all about, kind of just avoiding, those things that can come back, and all of a sudden our loss ratio is not 7%. It's 100% because we haven't, really done this blocking and tackling that we need to do. And as we plan these events and the contracts that we sign, I mean, that's one of the fundamental steps that we take.
And John notes that it is required, no exceptions.
I love it. All right. And obviously we just, when something does happen, we just want to make sure that, we're on top of it right away. What I can tell you is that I would love to have many, many questions in regard to, is this a potential claim? Should we report it? What should we do? Have those discussions, the day of or the day after. Our carriers will not penalize us for reporting potential claims. They want to know that there's real transparency in the relationship. I think a lot of times where we see late reporting, it's because people don't recognize the exposure or the potential for a claim. But one thing I will tell you, if it's a late notice, and certainly in the insurance industry, we see that to where it's the day before the statute of limitations expires in that state, and then all of a sudden somebody files that lawsuit to preserve that, and we're 2 years, 3 years, whatever that statute is, past the actual date of the incident, and we're really, really behind in regards to determining what happened. I understand that sometimes we just don't know. If we do have a physical building, those sidewalks where the public walk, somebody 2 years ago could say they fell, and maybe nobody saw them, or they never came in and said, hey, I fell on your sidewalk, until you get that lawsuit. But in most cases, we're aware of it. We may just not recognize it, and that's where I would just really recommend that you reach out. That's why we've got Rob and his claims team to kind of help walk you through those, see what we need, what can we do to help, maybe it's something we can take care of internally, which we're happy to assist the organization with. But, when we're in that situation, this is very, basic stuff, and I know you guys are all aware of it, but it's just repetitive, breeds, where we got this hammered and it, and but get immediate help, whether that's the fire department, if it's our own structure that's had some type of damage such as a fire, or if we are dealing with an injured person, to contact EMS to get them immediate and professional medical assistance. Secure and preserve any physical evidence. Certainly if it's a situation where somebody alleges that they slipped and fell on a defect on our property, is that defect something that's going to be there, a week from tomorrow, the day that it happened, 2 weeks, a month, or is it something that might disappear, like, snow or ice, to where we could prove that the sidewalks were properly cleared. Identify eyewitnesses and get contact info. The insurance company and lawyers, if this is a serious incident, they're going to want to reach out to those people so that they can develop the facts of the claim as people that would be considered unbiased see it, and then notify the headquarters as well as the insurance company. We're the broker. We're kind of the intermediary. We want to discuss things with you, and we'll determine, is this something that we should put the carrier on notice? Some of these policies have really strict timelines in regards to when claims need to be reported. So, we usually err on the side of caution in regards to getting into the carriers so that we protect any rights that you might have under that insurance contract. But it's a lot about communication, contact, and and then just cooperating once we do have an active claim investigation, or the insurance company's had to retain a lawyer to defend you.
Here's a very appropriate question. Is there a general and standard incident form?
Yes, also, I believe, in our insurance and claim manual. So we will make sure that that's updated and out there for everybody's use.
think we're caught up with questions right now.
Okay.
Please keep them coming, though.
Yep. Well, and again, thank you for everything, for the opportunity to serve the organization. I've really enjoyed getting to know many of the leaders of the organization over the last couple of years. I know that the questions that you bring us are always great ones, and obviously from the attendance of this webinar tonight, a very engaged group of leaders that we want to do whatever we can do to help you run a better temple or court, and make sure that one, you're properly covered, and two, that we don't have claims. We can continue on with the success that we're seeing with the initial start of this insurance program for you all.
Question, will this recording be available? Yes, we will share it. From what I understand, Zoom is kind of in a backlog with recordings. It can take 24 to 48 hours for the recording to compile, but as soon as that link is available, we will share it. I missed the slide about the pricing for individual courts, or has this not been discussed?
That has not been discussed.
Oh, okay, Dr. Gray, let me unmute you. Can we hear you now?
Yes, I just want to reiterate the next webinar date for everyone.
Yes. I have my little closing spiel that will include that, but it is 2 weeks from tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Mick Begill and I are going to share information about event planning and contracts with you. Okay, hang on. Some more questions. How can I get a copy of the PowerPoint? It will be shared along with the recording and the insurance and claim manual. Always direct questions to John Chapman in his office. Does insurance cover meetings not held in the temples, i.e. libraries, diner, restaurants, or conference rooms in another building?
Yes, and I probably didn't, that should be another highlight of the insurance coverage. Basically, any activity that, that occurs within the coverage territory is covered, which is the United States, Canada, and the U.S. possessions, including Puerto Rico. And so if anything happens within that coverage territory, it's covered. It's not, coverage is not limited to a designated premise. So even, we understand that even temples that have a physical property may have events away from that, or do activities and other events away from that physical address. So no, it's only limited by that coverage territory. But great question.
Will we be provided about pricing information and breakdowns at some point? And I believe that's probably a question best directed to Dr. Gray or John.
The temple and courts pricing comes from the Imperial Council.
How will the temples and courts obtain a copy of this meeting? We will share it with Ms. Lewis and Dr. Gray and Mr. Chapman, and hopefully then it will be sent out with the next invitation for the meeting in 2 weeks. I thought I did see a slide that had average costs for each temple and court.
Yes, that was earlier in the slide. That was earlier in the slide deck.
And that will be included in the PowerPoint that we send out. Does the insurance cover all properties of temples, i.e. mini cars and trailers? No, from Mr. Chapman. Yes, I believe he was referring to that. And yes, PowerPoints will be shared. People are saying thank you, Rich. Very nice. We appreciate it. I agree that this has been very informative. We appreciate being here. Are there other questions? Now's the time to ask your questions, but you have the contact information for Rich and Terry and Quinette and Rob, and my information is in the chat. As anyone is typing, please continue, but I want to thank you for your time this evening. I'd invite you to our website to check out all the resources we've created to support our clients. In addition to risk management, event planning, and more, we have a pretty lengthy list of COVID-19 resources that we're happy to share. That's at holmesmurphyfraternal.com. Please feel free to check it out. Any questions on pricing should be directed to the Imperial Potentate. Thank you, thank you. We appreciate it. All right, we're looking forward to the next webinar on September 29th. As I said, Mick McGill and I will gather with you to share information about event planning and contracts. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with you, and we hope to see you again in 2 weeks, and I will do my very best to make sure that there are 500 slots for this meeting. I do not know what happened. My most sincere apologies to the folks that were shut out. We'll try to get that cleaned up. In the meantime, we'll share the recording of this webinar with your leadership as well as the other pieces of information. Thanks again for being a part of tonight's presentation. Contact us with any follow-up questions or conversations. We really appreciate your commitment to the organization and the opportunity to work with you. Let me get one more look at any questions. I thought I saw one. Yes, our capacity will increase past 300. Will a thorough discussion be held on properly reviewing contracts force majeure specifically? Yes, and thank you for that comment. We'll make sure that that is part of next week's presentation. I don't see any other questions. If you think of something later, please don't hesitate to give us a holler. We appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight. Okay, wait, 3 more messages. Let me look. 5 new messages. Please address overseas temples and courts at the next webinar. Okay, we'll make note of that. Thank you for the participation. It's just really nice things that everyone is saying. Oh, and I have to say, to those of you who gave advice at the very beginning, there were some folks that were having trouble with their audio, and people jumped right in. And I just thank you so much for doing that. We appreciate it. One band, one song was one of the comments made, and I think that's a lovely sentiment. So I will send you off with that. Have a good evening, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.